Here.
Dublin.
Here.
Stata.
Here.
Bonsonville.
Here.
And then Shuda, Vashon, and Bergstrom. Thank you.
And I just wanted to, I didn't have John's introductions on here yet because I wasn't expecting him to be able to come until next month. So we're happy to have John Bonsonville joining us as the newest library board member. He got appointed on Monday. And John is really familiar with the building project. He serves on our building committee. So his pilot will be on both the library board and the building committee. So he has a lot of knowledge about the library project and the library already in the community. So we're excited to have John join us.
Hi, Jen. I'm Laura Stata. I've been a member now, I don't know, Coral,
4 years?
I think 4 years. Coral and I joined the board at the same time. So look forward to working with you on every project we have going forward.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
And I'm Coral Goplin, and I also have been on the board for 4 years, and apparently I'm the treasurer. I missed that last meeting, but I also do a lot of work with the personnel committee, as does Laura.
Excellent.
And I'm Jenny Nelson. I mean, we work together on the building committee. I'm the president of the library board for the next year, and I have no idea how long I've been on the board. So
Well, congratulations.
Longer than 4 years.
longer than
Greater than 4.
maybe 5 or 6. But, so yeah, so then we can go to the next item. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome.
Just a point of order question. Am I allowed to go ahead and vote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can vote on anything tonight. If there's anything you don't feel comfortable
That'll be
on
nice.
because you weren't here or because you don't feel like you have the appropriate information to do that, you can feel free to
Okay,
abstain.
I just don't want to do anything inappropriate.
Yeah, thanks for checking.
We're a fairly low-key board. I try to follow the rules as much as I can, but sometimes
Okay.
we jump a few things once in a while. So, community input is next. Clarice, I'm just going to ask if you have anything you want to share with us.
Thank you.
Awesome. And we will go on to the next. Consent agenda. I need a motion to approve or amend the minutes from last month's meeting. I think it's going to have to be you and me because we're the only two.
I will move to approve the minutes as presented of the previous meeting.
And I will second that. I'm assuming you two will abstain because you weren't
So then I don't think
here. I don't think we can
As
vote on
of then,
that.
we don't have enough people, so we'll have to add that back to next month's agenda.
Yep. Fun. Next, we like to do B and C together, so review and pay of bills and review and accept financial reports. I need a motion to do that, please. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Jennifer, things to share?
And John, these will make a little more sense once we do the trustee orientation, but
Sure.
in the packet, there's a list of all the bills in alphabetical order, and then the account category is shown next to those, and then the amount. The library board does approve all of the expenses that the library has. If anybody has any questions, I'm always happy to talk about what a particular expense was for. At the bottom and the second page, we have the expenses related to the new library project, and right now those are being paid for by impact fees, which are fees collected by the village for the library capital project that can only be used for that purpose. Does anybody have any questions about any of the items they see listed on the bills list?
Questions? Okay. Financial report?
So I don't think I have anything important to note on the financial reports. Our copy of revenue is still a little bit down from what it was pre-pandemic. Our interest rates are, the return on interest is a little bit higher than what we were expecting for this year, which is good. And we're on pace for most other things or where we might expect to be at this point.
May I ask a question?
Yes, John.
So, looking at the operating fund, we've got columns that are stated period actual, year-to-date actual, budget actual, variance, and percentage budget. I'm wondering if that budget amount is what's budgeted for the entire year?
Yes, the percent of budget reflects where it's budgeted for the entire year. Yep.
Okay,
So-
got it.
Those that are 100% are things that we pay for right away out of the gate. So there's memberships that we pay for right away in January that
Sure.
cover the whole year. There's
never see a prorated budget amount. In other words, if I wanted to find out what it was prorated for ending May, I would take this number times 5/12.
That would be one way to do it, yep. The village, this report's generated by the village, so I'm not sure they can do a report that way. I could ask if that's helpful for you.
I've just,
But yeah, that is
when
for
I-
the whole year is how it is showing.
yeah,
right
when I look at financials, the way my brain wraps around it is, where are we month to date,
Mhm.
year to date?
Yep.
And then compare that to actual,
Yep,
and then see where we are
yep.
in our spending up or down.
I can ask if their software allows them to do that, but in the meantime, you can look at that percent of budget, just compare it to the percentage of year to date.
And if I'm really, really curious, I can get my calculator out. Yeah, right? Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Any other financial report questions? All in favor of approving the financial reports and paying bills, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent, thank you. Next is committee reports. The Personnel Committee.
We
I failed. You failed on what?
It's okay. I had plenty of data. Yes.
I feel like I looked at you. I was like, oh no.
For the Personnel Committee, we gathered feedback from the board and from the library staff to put together Jennifer's yearly director's review. And that has been compiled, and we are ready, if we have quorum today, to present that to the board in closed session and then approve that.
Yearly, we do Jennifer's review because she technically reports to us as a
So,
village employee.
am I correctly assuming that my presence here allows us to have a quorum, and if I leave, we no longer have a quorum?
That is true.
That's correct.
Okay.
Don't be tempted.
Well, my personal situation is my wife's car has to be picked up from where it's being worked on. And so for us to get there before it closes, I have to leave by 6:30.
We should be.
Oh yeah, we'll be fine.
We should be done by 6:30.
We appreciate the heads up.
Yes.
I don't want to in any way impair the function of the board.
And I also told John, since it was his first meeting, if he didn't feel comfortable providing feedback or voting on that item, that was his prerogative too.
Yeah.
So it's totally fine if we want to just push that back to the next meeting. It doesn't matter either way. It's not.
Whatever you decide is fine by me. I don't want to interfere.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
I don't think it would interfere either way.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from the Personnel Committee?
No, not yet.
Thank you. The Building Committee has been exciting. We met last night and we were able to share some of the final site layouts, some of the exterior renderings, some materials that we're looking at, sometimes it's hard to see on the pictures, the texture and the colors and things, so we're able to share some of the samples with the Building Committee. People seemed excited about it, which is good, right? We have a floor plan that we'll be able to be sharing. We are going to the Plan Commission next Thursday.
So the Plan Commission meeting is August 4th.
August 4th.
Yep.
Okay.
We have to get them stuff by next Thursday.
So many dates. So we'll go to the Plan Commission meeting with August 4th to be able to kind of provide that finalized layout, get their approvals, and then we'll go to the village board, and we'll obviously be voting on it as a library board as well. But we're starting to look interiors, which I think the Building Committee people are super excited about the interiors as much as the exteriors, even more so. So, do you have any other thoughts from the Building Committee meeting yesterday?
I'm grateful that we have a plan we can move forward with, and I'm so looking forward to October 15th. That's the
That's the day we're
proposed,
hoping to bring
yeah, and get the shovel,
back.
you know, get the backhoe, get moving.
I'll be there. I'll bring
And-
champagne.
In order so that we can have, I'll be better here, foundations poured in time to beat the frost.
Yes, yes.
Because if for any reason we're pouring foundations in the middle of cold weather, that quadruples the difficulty and the cost. And if we want to stay on budget and on timeline, we have to move. I mean, we have faced every possible challenge known to library construction in the state of Wisconsin.
I
Why?
We're lucky.
Well, okay, let me take that in a direction. We'll be incredibly lucky when we can snip that ribbon,
Yes.
okay? Jennifer has been amazing. I just want to throw that out right now. Incredibly supportive and positive and accessible and transparent, and you can add that into her review later.
I'll add it as we speak.
If you want to.
On the fly.
So, it's been beyond an amazing experience. We had so much fun last night. I can't begin to tell you how much fun we had. It was crazy. And just being there and being in that moment, and I don't know, it was just something. So, is that, Jenny?
That's perfect. I appreciate the input.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in seeing pictures of things, we can show you at some renderings later if you want to see them. So
I've got a printout here if you want to.
the floor is
I'm excited.
So
Um,
there are, yeah, do you want to?
So I just want to highlight some things in your packets, so you know what's going on with them. There's the information that went to the Plan Commission at their July meeting, which was a very preliminary site layout and a preliminary exterior. The exterior especially has changed since then, but we just wanted to get in front of them for feedback to make sure that could be incorporated into the final site plan to make sure we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's. And then you also see the memo that was presented to the village board on Monday night at their request from the 6:20 meeting that Jenny and Jeff did a very nice job at answering questions. And so those documents are there for transparency for your information as well. If you have any questions, let me know. And I just want to highlight the schedule a little bit that John and Jenny both talked about. So we're working really hard. So one of the upcoming milestones will be we're going to have a joint meeting with the village board on August 15th, and that date's on your agenda. I'm sorry, August 15th. That date's in your packet here. That'll be a joint meeting for the village board to approve the project budget and the project plans. And so we'd like to have everybody there. If you can be there, it'll be hopefully an exciting meeting. And then our goal is to get the project out to bid in mid-September and get bids back in time for the village board's October 3rd meeting so that they can approve the library board to award the bid, and then we'll probably have to have a special meeting so we can award the bid right away to keep on that schedule. So right now it's feasible to start construction, like John said, this fall, and then they're anticipating about a year for construction once that happens. So.
Is it the 15th of August?
Yeah, Monday, August 15th at 5 o'clock. It's in I have a copy of the agenda if anybody wants a print copy with that date on it. Are there any questions?
The village board did approve the $600,000 for the solar and the geothermal. But the rest of the priorities, they weren't funded on Monday, so just so we.
Does that mean that we can request those funds again or try again at a future date, or is that like they're dead in the water?
No, I don't think we're going to. The items on the list, some of them we'll be able to do alternates on the bid documents. So
Sure.
we'll be able to say, give us the price to add this square footage or things that we're doing
Sure.
that way. And we're planning to have quite a few alternates so that way if bids come back favorably or if we have savings from the construction project or additional donors, we'll be able to add those things in and have those prices instead of going back later. But we are designing with a lot of those things in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Library director report.
So, first get started. So we already covered a lot of the building related things. So I'm just going to see if we missed anything here. We do have the news that Carrie, this is Carrie's second to last meeting, so she'll be moving on after 15 years of service on the board.
It's really been that long, wow.
We really appreciate all of Carrie's service. And then John and Laura Reese were selected by the village, or appointed by the village president and approved by the village board to serve in Kyle and Carrie's position for the remainder of the term. So we'll be welcoming Laura in September, and we'll be missing Carrie, but glad she's gonna have time for some other things. Today's the deadline for our circulation position that we added this year as an additional position to prepare library staffing levels for the new building. You can see we had an internet outage, and we had, of course, lots of people that day when we had no internet. Gratefully, the staff was amazing, the patrons are amazing, and we got through the day. We also are noticing that June has been really busy just relative to the pandemic, and it's just really feeling like almost a normal month. So we had 138 library card applications that month, and as far as we can tell, that's like the highest month of library card applications we've ever had. So, people are kind of catching up and getting back out again. You see on the agenda some building project dates we already talked about a little bit. And then the management team member did highlight some of the things they've been working on for the past quarter or the past month, depending on when they last shared information with us. I did want to highlight just one thing. They're all important, but there was one thing from Callie, and now I can't remember what it was. No, I can't remember what it was. I apologize.
Super exciting. 2,910 people attended 61 programs between April and June.
There's a lot going on for sure. Yep. You also have the summer. Kelly and Mark did a great, and Kara and Mark did a great job on this summer eBuzz. It does a great job of talking about our programs for different age groups. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check out what we have going on just so you're aware of it. You also have a copy of our July calendar with the events for the upcoming rest of the month, and then some statistics for the month. We usually just highlight those in more depth from time to time because they don't change that much, but you kind of see some of the numbers rebounding a lot more to where they had been pre-pandemic for the most part. There's some that are higher than they were pre-pandemic because of ways people use the library differently, and some that are like computer use is still quite a bit down from what it was before the pandemic started. Are there any questions on any of those, the newsletter, the director's report, or the statistics?
I'd encourage anybody to go to Triangle Park and read to get froyo tomorrow, though. So 2 o'clock, hang out in Triangle Park.
My kids are going.
I think it's
It's
at
at
Kaiser
Kaiser Park, isn't it?
I believe it's on Kaiser.
Oh, it's Kaiser,
Yeah.
sorry. Sure that.
My kids will be there.
That sounds fantastic to me. So, anything else, Jennifer?
I don't believe so.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your team. So exciting people are coming back.
It feels great. Yeah, no kidding. Just being there when all these kids come in, it's been fun.
Next are communications. So an email from Christina and Jeremy.
And I did reply to them, but just did want to share their information. Their neighbors' information was in our packet last month, and so they were interested in sharing the same information. So I did reply to them and said that I would share this information with you. So
Thank you. Village board announcements. Carlene isn't here.
So I'm trying to think of what all happened on Monday. So the village is working on their 10-year capital improvement plan, which is trying to plan purchases and anticipate village needs for 10 years, which is just going to give them a better long-range assortment. They approved funding for the pickleball courts to be included in JC Park project. They're meeting next week. They'll be looking at the zoning amendment for the new library site. They'll be looking at how to handle Juneteenth moving forward, and they'll be looking at, they also, last meeting set the comparables for the compensation study, which they are working on as well. One other thing they're working on is some diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and they have a recommendation from the DEI committee that will be presented for their approval on Monday, and that would include library staff in those opportunities. I think those are kind of all I can think of.
school district announcements. I don't know that she would summer, so we will skip that one. Upcoming meeting dates, so our next library board meeting is August 10th at 5 p.m. here. And then we have a joint meeting with the village board on August 15th at 5 p.m. And again, that's to go over the budget and the proposed plan. Approval as the next step of the MOU before we can send out for bid for the building project. Okay, so then discussion and possible action items. We need to, I need a motion to amend the memorandum of understanding with the Village of Oregon Village Board for the new library construction. Can I have a motion?
So moved by Goblin.
Well, we should probably talk about what we want.
I mean, we can make the motion and then we can discuss it if we want.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I'll second.
So it's in your packet.
So the main changes were just to include the village board action to provide $600,000 for the geothermal and solar that they said were priorities for the library project, with the caveat that if we are to get some of the grant funding that we have applied for, that the grant funding amount would be deducted from the borrowing. So if we got $300,000 would be deducted from that borrowing amount to offset it. And then if we got above and beyond that amount, we would be able to apply that towards the project. So those are the only that's the only substantial change. It did pass the village board meeting on Monday. It was a 3-2 vote. So there were 2 board members that did vote against the amendment because of the funding considerations. Is there any questions on the language?
No, I didn't see, I mean, it looks very straightforward and the changes that were made were pretty small as far as I could tell.
It's really just for the funding.
Yep.
Any discussion or questions?
I just have a question. What's the timeline on the grant? Do we know?
So one of them, they are hopeful we'll know by October. So if that's a kind of a wishy-washy timeline, though, that's their best case timeline, and it's possible it could be delayed beyond that. So hopefully, if we do find out, we'll be able to have priorities kind of identified that we could add back in right away. You know, grants are hard because a lot of times you don't get selected. These are more local, but it's just really not something we can count on. But we'd be grateful if we were selected for any amounts of funding.
I have a question.
Yes, John.
So has this memorandum of understanding been executed, or it's
Yes.
to be executed?
So we haven't executed a memorandum of understanding with the village. We had to do that as part of, before we even started the design process.
Okay.
So this, I think Carrie worked on that for 2 years.
So is this an updated version?
Yes.
This is an
Yes.
updated version. It really just updates the dollar amount
Sure.
that the village is contributing to the project. That's the only change
So
that we're.
So has it been signed yet, or not?
The village approved it on Monday. We would approve it tonight, but it is I don't know that it's signed.
They signed it because they approved the amendment. We have not signed it because our board has not approved it yet. We do have, like Jenny said, the original document. We have an agreement that is signed
Sure.
and executed, so if this one didn't get approved, we have that one that would prevail. There's no it's to our disadvantage not to sign this.
No, I get that.
And then just to clarify, the changes are noted in red. So Martin Shanks, the village administrator, did the language amendments.
Sure.
So the changes he made are mostly on page 2 of the MOU, which is 38 in the packet, and then the subsequent page. And those are the most substantial. Everywhere else is just to clean up
Right.
numbers to make sure they're consistent throughout.
So my understanding is basically it's just lining up the fact that we're going to be adding both geothermal and photocells, right? And the monies to be able to do that and the borrowing.
Correct. Yeah.
Is there anything over and above that that's really substantial and change?
No, the only other cleanup of language was that there was language about the impact fees the village collects and when the library can use those until.
Okay.
And it's before it said until the borrowing took place, but the borrowing is being done in 3 installments. So we changed the language to say until the final borrowing is conducted.
Got it.
And so then once the final borrowing is conducted, any impact fees collected after that will go to the debt service.
Okay.
And in some years it's $35,000, and other years it's almost $200,000. Last year was a big year for development in the village, so
Right, got it.
that's the only other clarification, just because the way the borrowing was done, it changed over the planning period.
So according to my read, it's pretty straightforward. We need to sign it, we need to be moving on.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. And it's been moved and seconded, we're through discussion now.
Are there any other questions?
Nope.
All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. I'll sign that after the meeting then. Next is the discussion about acoustic consultant services.
So this is to be proactive with the time frame we're trying to stay on schedule for. So I am very interested in us having an acoustical consultant look at the plans for the new library. One of the things we want to make sure that happens is that all the spaces can be used for the purposes they're designed for. So we want people to be able to use quiet spaces and enjoy quiet. We want people to be able to be in active spaces and not feel like they're disturbing other people. And an acoustical consultant would be able to look at our plans and evaluate scientifically how the sound will flow and what areas could be concerns, things with mechanical rooms and things with just the layout of the building and materials. And they can recommend things like thickening the walls or changing materials or acoustical panels that they know are effective, and can recommend a variety of products. I think they recommend 3 or 5 for each area. And so we're recommending, because of the time sensitivity, that you're approving up to the amount shown there for the purposes of hiring acoustical consultants. It's a little bit of a order problem because they can't provide an estimate until you provide the plans and the materials. And there's
Chicken and egg.
yeah, they're scheduling at least a month out. And so we're trying to get that going, or at least know that that's something that you're okay with us pursuing until we have the next meeting, to make sure that their expertise could be engaged. The amount here is just slightly higher than what Jeff has in the development budget, but we do have the ability, we wanted to make sure it was more than we thought it would be, so that, if it was $5 more or whatever, we don't want to have that delay the project or prevent us from getting that expertise. So that would be my recommendation.
I have a motion to approve up to $10,000 for the engagement of acoustical consultant. That's right, isn't it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
I think this is a really good idea, and in some libraries where
Yep.
it would have been helpful to have from the get-go, so I thank you for being proactive in this.
And Jenny got the recommendation from the school district on
Please.
the services.
There.
It's hard to find people that can do that work and that are
Yeah, I appreciate this. Thank you.
Excellent, yeah. Really good idea.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Then I gotta go back to the beginning. Lots of scrolling. Okay. Next is naming opportunities.
So I was very optimistic I would have some great answers for you tonight, because I've been trying to do this for months, and I just came to the conclusion that we're just not where we need to be with the plans yet. It also becomes very, you have to be very thoughtful, because anytime you add a level, you have to think about the donors that made commitments at similar amounts and how they may have chosen differently, and how, do we need to ask everybody, and how to handle those things without, with just honoring where everybody was at. So I don't have a recommendation today. I think once we have the floor plans finalized too, the other problem is the floor plans keep changing, so we'll see windows here, and then suddenly they're gone, and then suddenly they're moved. And so I just do not want to promise anything that we have to take out or that will not stay. And while I'd like to have those available for people, I think the donors also want to see what the plans look like before making decisions. So I think it's okay to wait, and if somebody really wants to talk about it beforehand, we can start the conversation and let them know what direction we're headed, but it's just, I don't think it's fair to them or anybody else to decide, or that anybody that has already given, until we're just really knowing we can do it in a thoughtful way. So I don't have anything on that tonight.
Okay. Organizational chart, annual review.
So this is something we just review on an annual basis to make sure we're transparent about how things are working. So you see the Board of Trustees at the top of the organization chart, and you oversee the library director position. The positions highlighted in green are our management team members. They're all full-time salaried staff. that manage department operations for their team in their specific area of expertise. We used to meet monthly before the pandemic, then we met weekly during the pandemic, and we're back to meeting weekly now about building stuff. So, and then each department is a little bit different based on their needs and kind of just the history of the staffing. So tech services has one full-time employee, and you can see circulation has multiple part-time employees. So they're each very unique department. Last time I presented this, board members indicated it would be helpful to understand how many hours each position worked. So behind the title, you see the number of hours for that position. And then I starred positions that are eligible for paid time off. Employees at village departments are eligible for time off after they work on an average of 20 hours per week. And then health insurance is around 25. There's a weird number that's prorated. It gets complicated, but just so you kind of understand which employees have benefits and which ones do not qualify for that. We don't need to take any action. It's more of an annual informational item, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, it's just a reminder as we go into budget time.
I had no idea, I should not admit this, but I had no idea that so many of our employees were part-time. I made some assumptions based on titles about who was part-time and who was full-time. But this makes it a lot more clear why we're struggling a little bit.
Jill, did you have a question?
Yeah, based upon the current salary expense, how does that compare to the budget amount within the budget for the salary? So are we above, below, right on target?
We are very careful never to go over.
Right.
We are actually below budget because we've had some position turnovers this year, and then the new position that we added was advertised. We wanted to be thoughtful about the hours we were posting for, so we advertised that, and we were hoping to start July 1. Our deadline's actually the 13th, so we're starting that position a little late, so there's a little extra unexpended staff funds for it because of those things. It's very hard to fill a position right away when someone leaves unless they give a lot of notice, which isn't something most people are able to do. Any funds we do not spend on staff can either be spent with library board approval on other items with your permission, or can, at the end of the year, any funds not spent by the library will go into our general fund, which is kind of a cushion for weird years where there's unexpected expenses or special capital. If you get to a certain point, you can use it for special capital needs.
So dollars not spent are not dollars that are taken back by the village?
No, once they're appropriated for the library, they remain under library board control.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
It was a fight, but we're there now.
Oh, good. So that didn't always used to be.
That
Did
didn't
not
always
always used to be.
No,
Oh,
it's-
I'm so glad. And then another question I have, is there a routine schedule to review employees and offer salary increases to them?
So the village does we do annual reviews of all our employees.
Okay.
And so that is done. Historically, in the village of Oregon has not been tied to wage increases.
Okay.
I gather that's partially because there just hasn't been a lot of funds available for wage increases
Got it.
because of levy limits and taxation and how things like that work. That's something the village this year is doing a compensation study, so they're evaluating the current wage points for all village employees to
Sure.
try to be consistent and equitable across departments. So they have a consultant working on that. They're hoping to have recommendations in time for next year's budget. And then they're hoping once that's done, maybe in a future year, maybe next year, they could work on the evaluation component and see, if there's a way to strengthen, that's changed a lot. And the village used to have a standard evaluation, I think maybe 20 years ago, but times and expertise and best practices have changed. They're
Of course.
hoping to be able to pursue that in the future.
And if I may ask another question, how is your staff morale holding up with regards to salary expectations and what they're receiving?
Our staff is amazing. I don't know if I'm the one who can answer that, so maybe you want to ask Laura or just pop in and ask our staff when I'm not around. I think we would always like to pay staff more, but we
Sure.
have made some significant strides since 2018. We've been able to make some adjustments over the past couple years, and
Okay.
I think our staff really appreciates that the village is valuing employees enough to do that compensation
Okay.
study
Okay.
and just show that village employees are important. We also have really great supervisors, and so they really look after their employees, and that helps with morale. For people appreciate some of those things that make their work experience
Okay.
positive.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can I just add that, like, our personnel committee, that has been a major focus over the last years as well, since Laura and I joined, and a lot of where we see the equity problems overall,
Yeah.
you know, that is one of the ones that we have some semblance of control over. And so Jennifer has offered so much information and so much data to allow us to thoughtfully increase as we can. Obviously, we can't just go to the village board and ask for our dream salaries, or we would. But we have moved things in a positive direction and continue to look at that every year to make
Okay.
sure we're thoughtful about it.
And there's also a step plan for adding staff to be able to get to when we
Yes.
build our new library. So we've tried to be thoughtful of how we're planning that and when we're adding positions and what we're doing. So it's something that, you know, Carrie's been planning a long time. We've been doing a long time, and the personnel committee has paid a lot of attention to.
There have been hints that when we assume what's the phrase for it, when you enter into and assume the use of the new library, that there's
Yes.
going to be a lot more demand for staff and need for additional staff members. Am I right or wrong about this?
So there's a couple things that go along with that. It's complicated. So like one key, prior to them moving to their new building,
Yeah.
Oregon Library was much, much busier than they were, and now their use has skyrocketed since they moved to a bigger building. A lot of people visit the library for the first time
Sure.
or find a space that maybe wasn't there before, and so their use has gone up a lot. Verona had the same thing happen when they moved into the new library. Every new library that I've heard of or talked to and asked the director that, or there's always that peak right away after you move with people visiting
Right.
and just trying to see what it's like. But it seems like those increases, they don't stay as high as they are the first month because everybody wants to see it.
Right.
But they do sustain and continue to grow once people are able to discover new services or rediscover new services or just have new needs met that they couldn't before.
Okay.
So that's one thing. You were asking about staffing.
Do we need to increase staff numbers?
Yeah, so the other thing is partially because of the space we've had, we have a 30-hour position, and that until the pandemic, she really had no workspace of her own. And so we just have
The library's just so small.
such insufficient staff workspace that she would float from workstation to workstation. And luckily during the pandemic, we were able to get her a laptop, and now we took over our meeting room space, which is no longer available for the public, which isn't very popular, but it's provided a much needed staff workspace, so it's been good for staff morale. So part of the reason that our staffing levels are lower than libraries of similar size like DeForest, for example, just because we simply don't have the room to necessarily put staffing unless we put people at, have everybody work night shifts or whatever. So it just doesn't work very well with the space we have. And so we're also analyzed staffing levels of similar communities in Dane County and what they're using for staffing to run their libraries with similar building size and similar circulation.
Sure.
And so we've kind of identified that as kind of a target for us to get to.
Okay.
And it kind of, this year we added a 20-hour position mid-year. Last year we added an 18-hour position and then increased it to 20 hours so
Okay.
to be equitable. We had a 10-hour position turn over and reevaluated how that worked to make better use of those hours and more efficient use of the staff time. So we're trying to prepare and make sure each department has the
Sure.
resources they need. But it's a little bit of an imperfect process because we're trying to add over time, and no matter how we add, that change from where we are now to being busier, we'll feel
It's a moving target.
busier, and it's just a different
Exactly.
workflow and a learning curve and things like that too. So
Part of the design of the library that we've been doing is to help, to not add a bunch of extra people that we're gonna need, right? So the sight lines and the way it's actually being designed, Jennifer and her team are very thoughtful about how they are gonna staff it as we're designing it. So part of that is the building layout too, they've been very
And
cognizant with.
I have noticed that, and that's one of the things that I've been really mindful of on the construction committee, visualizing what it will mean. And I'm very impressed with the design.
one of the things, though, you are right, because right now we have two kind of service desks for kind of two functions, although sometimes it's confusing as to where you go for what thing.
Right.
But with 2 floors, we will have those desks configured a little differently, but we are adding a desk in the youth services department. And we might not have it, we're going to talk later about potentially adding more youth services staff, but it might be that that desk is staffed around story times and after schools, after school time, so there might be a little bit of time where, where we aren't able to staff that desk full-time, but we just want to make sure the way that staff areas are laid out, support having managers by the team that are on the front lines if they need help, and then just to try to have staff close to where patrons are entering the building or the second floor, so if they need help, it's easy to find somebody and where to go.
Perfect. I'm sorry to take up so much of your time.
No, these are
This
really
is
great
important.
questions.
Yes.
This is so important.
It's great for you to
Every new member.
understand.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions on the sheet, chart? Okay, the 2023 library budget request.
And so I will tell you that this year is the year that I have the least confidence in the numbers that I'm giving you tonight because of all the uncertainty related to the new building schedule, the village compensation study. So in your packet, you have spreadsheets. So first, just the background is our budget is due to our budget's a little different because it requires library board approval before it goes to the village. So their deadline to get it to them is the 19th, which means we have to approve our library budget request for them by mid-August. That's always a little challenging because there's things like health insurance and insurance rates and things that they don't even know what number to even guesstimate at this point. We just have to do the best we can to make an educated guess. The village does have some plans to or hopes to be able to include the results of the compensation study to make some adjustments for village staff. That may not mean everybody gets a significant adjustment. Maybe there's 2 positions that get adjusted, or maybe everybody gets adjusted. We have no idea what those recommendations will be, but they do have some funding set aside in this year's budget and hope to be able to make adjustments next year. It'll just kind of depend on what the recommendations are. So what they've done now is the numbers you see, just estimate a placeholder of 3% across the board, and that doesn't mean but there's no guarantee that any individual will get that particular thing. So the library board does have the authority to decide how to use the funds appropriated for the library, so you could deviate from what the village does, but it's also, we want to buy in with the work that they've done, so it would be recommended that you kind of follow the recommendation unless there's serious reason to do something different. So that means at our next budget meeting, we will approve or hopefully approve the budget, or we'll need to schedule another special meeting to wrap up any questions. So if there's any information that you'd like to see from me, please ask tonight or let me know so that I can provide that for the next meeting. And then you do have a copy of the village budget schedule in your packet to kind of see they go through a process of reviewing all the department budgets, and their final budget adoption isn't until the end of November, so it's a multi-month process with lots of meetings that they consider all the department and the village needs and try to balance those priorities. They do have, in the memo from Martin, kind of specify what they're able to increase the whole village levy and how many dollars they have to spread across all the departments for increases. So that's something that they have to consider as well. So a couple of things that are a little bit hard that I kind of alluded to are new building related things. So right now, based on the current schedule, Jeff's estimating we'd be able to have occupancy in November and do a grand opening in December. So if we do that, there could be some costs related to the new building, but because the plans aren't finalized, it's hard to project what those costs will be. But things like elevator inspections that we wouldn't have had before, sprinkler inspections, I don't think we have a sprinkler right now, just costs associated with the second story and just a bigger building that we'll have to budget for. We may, so a lot of those things are under warranty the first year, so if something breaks, a lot of those things are under warranty, and we also spend a lot of money repairing things that are outdated or worn out, just like the senior center does, and so some of those costs may balance out. It's just really hard to project the cost savings versus the added expenses with where we're at right now, but we'll try to make some educated guesses based on other communities' expenses. Janitorial is one that I'm want to be careful about thinking about how to handle it, because we really do need more cleaning time in a bigger building, and how we handle that is something that we want to be thoughtful about. So
As the village, I think, has some janitorial services at their building that'll be across the street. I wonder if we just ask for a rough cost for what their contract might be.
So they, yeah, and they're in the middle of switching how they've done things historically. So there's some conversations about maybe it's an employee in the future, maybe we split, some services with the village. Right now, if we were to hire an employee, the main concern is when that employee has time off or in between positions. We still need the library cleaned, and our library gets a lot of use, so it's not like you can really just skip a day here or there. People really notice if it doesn't get done. And we want to make sure, that the new building is cared for properly, that it's maintained as well as possible. So that's something, even if we don't have a firm answer now, we'll have some time. If we're only in there a month, we have a little bit of flexibility with the general fund that we have built up, the fund balance we have built up, that we could do something a little different than we're expecting, but it's just something that we'll continue to discuss. The other thing is meeting room software, just to manage meeting room reservations. There's a fee for that we've looked up. There's two options that we're aware of that most of the libraries use. One is not being sold anymore, and the other one is the cost you see here. We'll just budget according to that, and we can do more research on other options available. Previous to the pandemic, we just used a paper calendar for reservations, so that system doesn't work very well for multiple rooms and things like that.
It was only one room. I mean,
It's one room, yep.
to be fair, there was only one room before.
The other thing, too, that I'd really like to see us include in the budget request, and if we aren't able to get it this year, I think we should continue the conversation for next year, is programming. We're very fortunate to have an amazing Friends of the Library group that basically all of our programs are sponsored by them at least this year, with the exception of the staff time that we contribute that doesn't come out of their contribution. They're amazing, and we're grateful for their support, but in any one year, something could change, and their support, we can't force their support, and we can't necessarily guarantee it. Their revenue is, based on some great sources of income and their generosity, but I think it would be in our best interest to at least start maybe building a fund that we could have some guaranteed money in each budget year, in addition to whatever generosity they want to make, as we look to expand programming in the new library and make sure we can keep that level of service that people expect and grow with more staffing. And then the other things I want to point out is Jenny talked about the staffing step plan a little bit, and we kind of, again, every time we have an opening or change, we revisit what those plans are. So we went to the personnel committee. I reported to them that our plans had changed a little bit, and so my recommendation to them was that we consider adding a full-time teen librarian position. We do lots of programming, and our staff are wonderful, but they're very much spread thin, and so they're not able to be proactive about as much stuff. We will be adding that children's desk in the new library, and being able to have kids go to the desk where people are able to help them specifically to serve their needs. Allows our staff to work more efficiently, our customers to be helped better, and then it allows to increase partnerships with the youth center, the senior center, and just serve the community better. So the personnel committee did make a recommendation that we present that position to the board for approval. Ideally, it would be full-time. We are finding a lot of the staff that we've lost over the last year since the pandemic started has been people that are needing to find full-time work with benefits. And because of the nature of this position, taking a real leadership role in serving youth, doing programs, we really want to make sure we get somebody that's qualified and will want to stay in the position. And so that's a logical place to try to have benefits available if we can. Because we're adding the circulation services position mid-year this year, half of that financial impact hits the 2022 budget, and the other half of the year will hit the 2023 budget. And so I asked the village to analyze what the cost for that position, the teen position, would be with benefits based on starting mid-year next year, and that would be $33,000 roughly with benefits, or starting in September, beginning of September, which would be for 3 months, and that cost would be $21,000. That's based on them taking full-time health insurance or family health insurance. And we really don't know what health insurance someone may or may not want until they start. So that's really difficult to anticipate. So it could be less, but that's kind of worst case scenario. Ideally, we'd love to have somebody start by September 1st because if we're moving in November, we'd like to have the time, the Village Hall, for example, has been closed every Tuesday to prepare for moving, and we can't really close because it affects our revenue. We'll probably close right before we move for like a 2-week period, but if we're closed every Tuesday all year long, it really goes against what our mission is, and so it would be really beneficial to have that extra person on board to be fully trained in services before we move, and then also to be able to assist with moving the youth services department and just the whole library because of just it's going to be a whole different setup. I just wanted to present those options and get any feedback from you tonight on which you'd like me to show you next month, and I can show you both. The numbers you're seeing in front of you on the budget are not including that position right now, so that would be in addition to what you see there. And as you can see with the 3%, most of our expenses are related to personnel, so with a 3% increase based on the village's suggestion, as they're suggesting for all staff, that is a big number, and then we also have the impact of that part-time circulation position, so that's driving most of our numbers. So that's kind of going to cloud the conversation. WRS rates are going up. Health insurance, the village told us to budget at 8%, so those are some pretty significant impacts that we really don't have any control over. The other challenge we have is the county reimbursement for 2023 that comes from counties outside of Dane is down by almost $5,000, and that's because it's related to service provided in 2021, in which we were still closed for the first 5 months of the year, along with many of the other village departments because of the pandemic. And so during those times, we had a lot less library use because we were only doing curbside pickup, and then the visitors that typically come from outside of the village or areas closer to the village and other counties tended not to use the library as much. There's a lot of people working from home or just staying home to be safe, and so we had a lot less use in that category, which is why we're seeing that revenue decrease for those services.
Which we expected, so that's not a...
So the color coding doesn't mean anything. It just color coding for me to go back and update things or revisit numbers. But I do have in your packet a description of what each account is used for. So if you have a question, we can explain, why is something increasing or what is that account for. So I'm happy to answer any questions folks want to talk about tonight. But like I said, I have some work to do related to the new building that's just very difficult to predict at this point, and I need a little more time to work on that.
So, if I'm reading this correctly,
Probably not. With the additional staff member and the 3% increases and the things that we already know about, that puts us at a 4% increase.
This one
4.15.
include your staff member, right?
No, so this does not include the teen librarian
Okay.
position.
Sorry.
So the total expenditure is the very bottom line on the second page, the 4.15, that's the increase to our total budget. That would be a result of the changes. And then the dollar amount is right next to that. So
That's
correct.
without the extra.
Without the teen librarian position. Yep.
So our annual operating budget's right at $1 million.
Just around, yep. We were just under last year, and it'll probably be just over this
Right.
year. Yep. And like I said, the majority of that is staffing, far and away.
It's a lot of moving parts.
I would love to see the percentage with that new staff member. I recognize that that is potentially going to put us into a percentage increase that might be a little uncomfortable, but given the fact that we are moving to the new library, I do think that it is reasonable for us to ask for what we actually need in order to support the library that our village has agreed we need to build, frankly. So I'd love to see it with that.
And would you like to see both start dates or do you want me to go with one particular start date? I can easily just add a line for each one. so you
I'd
can see
rather do
difference.
the earlier one where the one where it helps us the most, realistically, because I mean, this has been our approach in the past, like ask for all of it and then have like a kind of a backup plan of like what it would look like. Okay, maybe we start in September instead, but I'd rather ask for the most that we think we need out of the gate.
Okay, so I can include that
Agree.
information.
I would agree 100%, and I also feel like the value that the community gets for this $1 million a year,
Unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. It
So
is.
true.
Like if you think of it that way, and that's how I think of it. So,
It's amazing what we've done with $1 million.
I am impressed and blown away by our staff and what they can provide for this. Like, so I wholeheartedly would back up asking for a team position starting in June.
Well, the only question I have, Jennifer, is you talked about putting money in there for programming. Which line is that?
That is, I don't know if I did that or not because I was way behind.
Right.
I meant to. So it would be the outreach line. So
Okay.
that one has not, the programming amount has not been added to that yet.
Okay. So,
So that is not shown. The other thing I kind of struggled with this year is the training and the mileage for travel for training, because our expenses for the last 2 years have been way under budget. But prior to the pandemic, we were planning on increasing and asking for more money to support the professional development of the staff. But then now we haven't really needed to do that. We'll probably spend less than 50% of the training budget just because there's more trainings online. And then staff don't always feel, there's some in-person trainings, but staff maybe don't feel comfortable yet going to some of those for health reasons. And so people are doing things, but they're not costing what we would expect in a typical year. I see that we historically have budgeted $500 per management team member, and then some additional funds for part-time staff. Also, our staff in services, we do twice a year. We have some funds for those. And then sometimes we partner with other village departments on trainings, and we want to make sure that if we have a share of a training session that we're contributing our fair share. So I cut the mileage a little bit just because there are some things, but we also want to make sure that people, if they want to go to WLA and it's in Appleton, that they can go to those opportunities because they are limited, but they're also very valuable to their creativity and their morale. So, I mean, I've been hesitant to cut more from that until we can kind of see what a typical year is like.
And I think this year's going to turn more back to how it was, because I have more staff for my, that have working for me, asking to go to conferences and go to trainings more so than they did the last few years. So I think they're going to be more interested in it, and I think I'd rather leave it where we were planning before than cut it now.
I would agree, Jennifer, and I would also add, Jennifer, that I look at that as a benefit to a position and not necessarily like something separate. So I would be in support of keeping it or increasing it because professional development is a benefit to a position.
Yeah, and given the fact that we have been focused on staff retention, I don't want to like remove things that will lower the satisfaction and the feeling that you are growing within your own position. For sure. Can I ask a question? Do we have an idea of maybe some comparable libraries and what their program funding looks like?
I've been meaning to do that for like 2 years and I haven't done it. But what I can say is Dane County was looking at their standards and they were debating whether they could add it, and I asked them not to because we were the only library in Dane County that didn't have any programming money included in their budget. Because that's not typical to rely on a group outside of your board's control for critical services. But the senior center gets funding from Council on Aging for some special things. So we have a very strong history of volunteerism and pride in the community assets here in Oregon. So we kind of want to respect both models and just make sure we're taken care of and able to offer those services, but then also to try to be reasonable too. So it's kind of a balancing act.
Well, and I would assume that other organizations who are raising funds and using those in other ways within the library. So it's not that there would not be opportunities for the volunteers and the work and the money that goes into that to benefit the wider library. It would simply potentially safeguard our programs and allow more flexibility in the way that we use the money.
I would say that's accurate. I mean, we have an amazing friends group and they would never do this, but in any one year they could stop. When I started my last position, I had a friends group that I wouldn't even show up to update some information for me, so we basically had to restart the organization from scratch. So they control those funds. So they could decide next year, we don't like your library director, we don't want to support you. And they could choose to use their money in different ways, or they could say we only want to support these things and not programming, and that's totally up to them because they've raised that money and they have control over that money. And they would never do that because they're amazing and they care about the community, but just to have that security and some safety, and just to show them that it's kind of not fair to have that whole burden be on them for things that are really critical to the community, and that we see as a core service and part of our mission. That we appreciate that and we want to have their support and contributions enhance what we're doing, but to rely on them is a lot of pressure, especially given the pandemic. Their book sales were difficult to run during the pandemic. They rely on the Bills Receipt program, which could go away at any point. We're lucky to have Bills, be so generous with community organizations through the receipt program, but if they decided to stop that, or if Bills close or something, we wouldn't have those reliable revenue streams, and we just need to make sure those are there for the work that our librarians do.
Well, I think that you just made a fairly strong argument simply by stating, like, if we go to the village board and we say we need this increase, we are the only library in Dane County that does not have a budget for this. I do think that is a pretty strong statement. We as a community do not wish, we want to be at the forefront of things and not like at the end of adopting things, and so I imagine that is a strong motivator for our wider community to put effort and money into this.
And I would want to verify that that's still current now, because 2 years ago I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when I first started, that was the case, but I don't want to say it's the case now if things have changed.
No, that's totally valid.
I would also add that as the library itself is growing and the community is growing, the programming will also need to grow, and then, having the friends support us is wonderful and we appreciate it, but I don't expect them to fund at the rate that we're growing.
Yes, we need you to grow at 30%, please. That'd be great. Yes, agreed.
Any other questions or things for Jennifer for the budget for next month? Anything else you want to see?
I don't believe so.
Right. Then is there anything else you need from us, Jennifer?
No, I'll try to sharpen my pencil and get you better numbers for next month, or at least feel as good as I can about them. The village has been great last year, especially about having conversations about their limitations, and there's lots of important needs in the village, and they do a great job of trying to balance those needs and honor all the departments the best they can. It just sometimes they have to make tough decisions. So we did have the teen librarian positions submitted as part of the compensation study, so that position would be placed just like any other position, so that would be given an appropriate wage based on responsibilities and commensurate with the other village staff that have been evaluated to be fair as that's established, if it is approved.
So the next item is to convene in closed session pursuant to Chapter 19.951C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises liability. So we have to have a motion to convene in closed session, second, and then we need a roll call vote for this.
Nelson,
Yes.
Shuda,
Yes.
Gottlieb,
Yes.
Shada,
Yes.
Bonsanfio.
Yes.
We need just a minute for OCA and Laura and I to
I wasn't going to
Have you
chase
away?
you out.
so if you want to take a 5-minute break, that would be spectacular.
And Laura, I can take the last line of minutes for you.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
I signed it.
Can I take your iPads?
Oh,
Would
yeah.
that be okay?
Yeah, I have paper copies for what we're about to.
And if anybody needs to keep it, you can just drop it off at the circulation desk after this